Hello, and welcome to the Science Fiction and Fantasy Marketing Podcast, the show where we help you establish your author brand, increase the size of your audience, and sell more books. I'm Lindsay Baroker, and I'm here with Jeffrey Poole and Joe Lalo. And we have a great guest for you this week, Seanan McGuire. I think I said it right. Yay me. Seanan is a native Californian, which has resulted in her being exceedingly laid back about venomous wildlife and terrified of the weather. When she's not writing urban fantasy as herself, science fiction thrillers as Mira Grant, she likes to watch way too many horror movies, wander around in swamps, record albums of original music, and harass her cats. I'm going to go ahead and let you introduce your book, Seanan. Thanks for joining us today, and we're going to be talking traditional publishing and Patreon today.
Thanks for having me. I write books. I've written a lot of them. It's really difficult to make me stop.
It looks like I was trying to find the publication dates of the first one. It looks like you started around 2009 or so. Is that right?
My first book came out in September of 2009, so I actually just had my 7-year anniversary about 2 weeks ago. And that's both kind of terrifying because 7 years is a long time, and kind of frustrating because I write at a terrifying pace. And so folks keep going, oh, she's put out 30 books. Obviously, she's been doing this for decades. And so we've started getting articles for more than a decade. Seanan McGuire. I'm like, 7 years? Can I, still have a little bit of,
I've seen others.
You just turned into a Dalek.
All right, are we caught up now?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Great. Yeah, we got a little lag there, I think. Yeah, with indie authors, sometimes we'll see them putting books out every month or two, but it seems really rare with traditional publishing. Could you tell us how you got started and like what led you to start 2 pen names and just start writing all those books and how they were okay with that? I guess you hear that traditional publishing, they only publish once a year, every 2 years sometimes. So how's everything working?
Well, every 2 years is more likely, barring some kind of editorial slow up, or someone went on maternity leave and someone didn't come back and da da da. Every 2 years is usually I am an author who writes slowly. Once a year is the tradition, is the common wisdom, at least for hardcover publishing. But there's always been the carve out for pseudonyms. I mean, the entire mystery genre would just fold like a badly built house of cards if you said you can only publish 1 book a year and you can only be one person. Because I'm pretty sure that half of cozy mysteries are written by the same 3 people. And I say that as someone who loves cozy mysteries and has friends who write cozy mysteries. It's a very stack on stack on stack on thing. In 2009, when my first book came out, that means I sold in 2008. Sorry, I'm just getting over a cold. Back then, independent publishing was not as stable as it is now. It was still mostly micro presses, vanity presses, which were very predatory. This was during a period where someone who said they were an indie author, it was almost a 50-50 split between they are self-publishing in a reputable way that is good for them and good for their career, and someone is taking advantage of them and taking all their money in exchange for letting them say that they're a published author. So I didn't have the street smarts to want to navigate that labyrinth. And also I am super lazy. Like, all I want to do is write and watch horror movies. That is 95% of my life. And to be a successful independent author, still today, but even more so back then, when you were building the tools rather than taking advantage of the tools and the support structures that have been built, you have to be a phenomenal, incredible Leslie Knope level go-getter. And I am not a Leslie Knope character. I'm an Audrey Plaza character. I am sitting back and letting you build a set of stairs, and then I'm going up them. So traditional publishing was always going to kind of be the route for me. And I got there by getting an agent, and, it was the usual slog.
Yeah, I don't think I would have even given it a consideration back in 2008 either, before the Kindle was really a thing. It's just, let's go print 5,000 books and try to sell them out of our garage.
Yeah, I mean, it's really easy to forget how quickly everything has changed in terms of the industry and the understanding of the industry and the tools that we've all built to deal with each other, to communicate with each other. I still know some older authors, by which I don't necessarily mean chronological age. I just mean time in the business. You know, some of them are my age or even younger. They've just been publishing twice as long, who have a very difficult time taking self-published authors seriously, not because they mean to be awful, although that is pretty awful, but because they lived through 10 or 15 years of the dealer's room being full of people who had printed those 5,000 books in their garage and were just people. And it was very difficult to navigate that period. You know, folks were very desperate because you're stuck with these 5,000 books. It's not you're building your market, you're building your brand. It's I have mortgaged my house for 5,000 books. And that hard first impression to get past.
Yeah, definitely. So how did you go about getting an agent? Did you do the usual sending inquiry letters, or were you trying to network with people at conventions and that sort of thing?
Buffy the Vampire Slayer porn. A lot of Buffy the Vampire Slayer porn, like Spike and Xander and Buffy and Faith and banging from coast to coast. I also wrote a lot of Harry Potter porn. Not as much though. A lot of Veronica Mars porn and some incredibly long, detailed fix-it novels about an obscure Disney Channel property called Halloween Town. And that was all available to read anywhere because it's fanfic. And my agent read it and liked it and contacted me and said, hey, you know, have you got anything original? Have you been working on anything that doesn't belong primarily to someone else? I'd really like to see it. And you know, it's interesting because authors are really split almost 50-50 between, hey, I came from fanfic. Either I wrote fanfic and then I stopped to focus on my original fic, or I was writing fanfic right up until the moment that my first hit the shelves, and I still write fanfic, and fanfic is love, and fanfic is where we live. And authors who will make statements, and this I'm quoting a statement that was made non-ironically, that writing fanfic is like breaking into that author's home and raping their children. And there's very little middle ground, which is fascinating to me. And it's also
Nice.
being anti-fanfic, I think, is actually a bad marketing move these days.
It's interesting because we have had a lot of authors on that got their start with fanfic.
Mhm.
Were you publishing on one of the popular sites and they were just looking for Buffy porn and found you?
Remember 2008. Archive of Our Own was not real yet. Fanfic.net was in the middle of the big schism. I was on LiveJournal. The big sites really weren't there. Things changed quickly. Archive of One's Own did not go out of beta until 2010, I believe. And fanfic.net, which is still a wretched hive of scum and villainy, love it, but wow, really didn't gain any good search metrics until about 2011.
So they just found you from your LiveJournal post. Did you have quite a big following there?
A relatively big following. We also had some friends in common. I mean, I think most people in traditional publishing have what we like to refer to as the purple unicorn path. You know, you wrote fan fiction, or you were roommates with somebody who knew Stephen King's son who introduced you to a literary agent, or you fell asleep in the wrong train car. And it's part timing and part nepotism.
That sounds like the dream way to be discovered, though. Like you're just putting your stuff out there, and I think if I did that, nobody would ever find me. So,
But again, things have changed more. I mean, it's harder to grow a large fandom as a fanfic author than it used to be. A lot of the fanfic authors have gone to self-publishing with the serial numbers filed off, or have just gone into the archive sites, which is a wonderful place to be. Archive of One's Own is a fantastic fanfic resource, and I kind of wish I'd had that earlier. But it means that you're not growing a community the way that you were in the LiveJournal days or in the private archive days. So again, things shift, the industry moves.
okay. Well, did you start publishing as yourself, or did you start with the science fiction pen name? It looked like they both had quite a bit of history there.
I started as myself. Rosemary and Rue came out in September of 2009, and then Feed, which was the first Mira Grant book, came out in May of 2010, and was okay.
Oh, well, we might be frozen there again. Are you guys? I can see your eyebrows moving, Joe. So it must be. It must not be us.
I think we might have lost her.
Or trilogy were acquiring feed. Can you hear me now?
Can you hear us?
Up. Yeah, you're breaking up a little bit, but I think we've got you back now. Are you still there?
Uh-oh. It's that East Coast connection. All right. I can see you moving. Can we hear you now? Or can you hear us now?
Hear you all the whole time.
All right. We're not able to. We're losing you there. So sorry about that.
That's okay. Can you hear me now?
We can.
Yeah, we can hear you now.
Okay.
We lost you when you were explaining like why you started the pen name or when you started it.
Okay. Rosemary and Rue was September 2009. Feed was May of 2010. Part of why it was acceptable to be both people at the same time is that essentially Orbit, when they acquired the Newsflash trilogy, they were acquiring a new work by an untried debut urban fantasy author, because Rosemary and Rue wasn't out yet. And in traditional publishing, the sales of each book under your name will impact the orders placed for the next book under your name. You write a book and Barnes & Noble orders 10 copies but sells 5, it will only order 5 copies of your next book. And that makes it physically impossible for you to sell 10 on book 2. Orbit really did not want to take the risk that Rosemary and Rue was going to tank. Are concerned to have. I am the only person still standing from my year group of debut urban fantasy authors. Urban fantasy is a very easy genre to sell a book in, and it's a very difficult genre to sell 2 books in. So Orbit Flesh as a pseudonymous work. I said I talk a lot. They said, well, the Barnes & Noble computers won't know, which is the logic behind most pseudonyms, and so we got that set up. And that was a minimum of 3 books a year.
Okay, and did you have to do any, we're going to ask you more about marketing in the second half, but did you sound like you really, I sympathize, I just want to write too for the most part. Did you do any marketing, or did they send you off to do book signings and that kind of thing? Or it seems like with 2 pen names going, it would be tough to keep on top of it all.
I organize a lot of my own events locally, but if it's anything remote, I have to be sent or I wait for conventions to ask me. I am fortunate in that I have a publicist. I have a couple of publicists. I love them. It always does feel like the choices about the money are a little opaque. Charlene Harris is a friend of mine. We share a publisher. There was a period where we both had a book coming out at the same time, and it was a given that she would sell 1 billion copies because she's Charlene Harris and it's a Sookie Stackhouse book. And so I was a little confused that marketing put such a push behind it when that's guaranteed or other authors. And I still don't fully understand the logic there. You know, it's not common sense logic to me, but I do what I can. I blog a lot. I do a lot of giveaways. I try to be chatty and friendly on social media without being dishonest. So there are a lot of snake pictures and vague threats to destroy humanity, in addition to the, hey, buy my book, feed my cats.
All right, cool. Well, let me hand you to the guys to ask more of the introduction kind of questions, and then we would love to talk to you later about your Patreon and what else you're doing for marketing.
Yep. Now, one of my questions was about self-publishing, and we know that when you got into it, self-publishing was not what it is now. And now that first off, now that self-publishing has matured and you've got an established following, have you put any thought into potentially self-publishing anything?
You could not pay me. You literally could not pay me. In fact, if you did, it wouldn't be self-publishing. I give away a lot of fiction for free on my website, which some people say is self-publishing because I am writing the story, having the cover commissioned, formatting them into ebooks and posting them. I say it doesn't count because I don't sell anything. So completely for free, you can go to my website and download a story that I have written that comes with a little description, tells you what you're downloading. Sounds like a good time, right?
Yep.
I have received everything from, this is 6 pages of every within the story, to, you stupid bitch, nothing happened in this story. I'm like, well, it was a wedding that I had been asked to write, and the blurb for the story on my website says very explicitly, this is just the wedding. Like, I was asked to write the wedding, so I wrote the wedding. Nothing really happens. We have a wedding. No monsters attacked by bugs. It's a stupid bitch. And pretty much the only way that I can handle that kind of comment is by going, well, you got what you paid for. Everything about it that was good was great, but I don't think I could handle getting not only the criticism for my actual writing, but the criticism for every step in the process, which I have seen some of my friends who have thicker skins than me get for their self-published works. You know, if it's a typo, suddenly it's entirely on you. If Amazon does what it did to a couple friends of mine and chooses not to release the book that you have taken pre-orders for on the date that you said you were taking pre-orders, all of that's coming to you. And I just want to write. I don't want to be a layout person, and I don't want to complicate my taxes more than they already are. And it's nice to have to know that there's the option if I'm ever really, I'm writing so much faster than they'll let me publish, or I desperately need to try a new genre that no one wants to take that risk on, or even just I really, really need some money, that option is there. But right now, I don't think you could pay me. I have so much respect for all y'all that do that. I'm just, yeah, go team you and your thick skins and your incredible armored hides and your ability not to just start murdering people. I would just start murdering people. Blood everywhere.
It takes a fair amount of self-control sometimes to pull in the claws when somebody makes an unreasonable remark, but you know, it's the path we've chosen. I have to say that I absolutely can agree that self-publishing puts an awful lot on you. I have done tech support for my readers where it's like, how do I load this onto my device? And it's like, I don't know that they would really ask, like, you know, Tom Clancy that question, but I'll answer.
Yes, they would. Because they will ask me that.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. Basically, you know, again, the industry shifts. It used to be that you had traditional publishing had respect and not, and bit by bit we're moving. And John dies at the end. As they move from self-published into traditionally published, they get all that attention. People start to really understand that self-published work can be of high quality, can have value, can be super entertaining. But it also comes with authors who will do tech support for you. Yep. Who control every single step of the process, who can say, well, the book is not out in Germany today, but it'll be out in Germany next Wednesday. That's a very good point. I'm getting it posted. I don't have any of that control. But people look at a self-published author and go, well, you know, this person self-publishes and they have that much control. Obviously, the traditionally published authors I enjoy must also have that much control. There's no possible way they would have given up that much control. But, you know, we did. Some of us years ago, some of us yesterday. And often my answer to questions is, you're going to have to ask my publisher. You're going to have to ask someone that is not me. I don't know. You know. And if you know, I must know. And I must be lying to them when I say I don't know.
Oh, that's, yeah. Again, you know, you use frequently the phrase "wretched hive of scum and villainy," and it really seems like it's not hard to find one of those.
No, it's sadly not.
All right, so I had some questions about pen names, and you sort of established this. It's interesting that a pen name with no history is sometimes preferable to an established name with an unknown history at the moment. It makes sense in an unusual way, but I never would have thought of that. That having been said, you've got at this point two successful authors, you know. And is there at any point, you know, the concept of merging back together into one, like retiring a pen name once it's no longer necessary?
Well, for one thing, they are both very necessary. Do you remember Reservoir Dogs?
I do.
Okay, do you remember that it was a Disney movie?
I don't.
Yep. Disney made Reservoir Dogs, and then Disney helped create a new entertainment subsidiary called Touchstone, so that no one would ever, in all seriousness, have to utter the phrase, Disney presents Reservoir Dogs. It's marketing. Mira Grant writes science fiction techno thrillers. In a Mira Grant book, science is king. Fairly precise. I have abandoned book concepts because the science would have taken me to places that I didn't want to go, because I didn't want to deal with people assuming that I made that up. I do years of research on Mira Grant books. I get furious when people decide that my science must not be true without bothering to Google it first. Seanan, though, in addition to occasionally speaking about herself in the third person when the pseudonyms question comes up, Seanan writes urban fantasy. Seanan writes comedic horror, but when I'm writing as myself, my horror does not have to have a good scientific grounding. You know, if Mira wants to melt you, Mira needs a chemical or a virus that can melt you. If Seanan wants to melt you, you just fucking melt. But Seanan, because as myself, I'm an urban fantasy author, and rightly or wrongly, urban fantasy is often written off as a girly genre. People think it has cooties or something. I have had, and I am not exaggerating, upwards of 24 readers, all men, come up to me at signings and tell me that I am either one of or their absolute favorite author. Would never have picked up one of my books had they been aware that I was also Seanan McGuire, the urban fantasy author. You know, and
people are weird.
People are weird. People get marketed to. People want certain things. It works in the reverse too. I've had Seanan fans read my work as Mira and be very upset that it was clinical and profane and kind of moist. I mean, horror is a mood as much as it is a genre, and that mood is kind of moist and sticky. I do have a lot of readers that read both of me, but on the whole, urban fantasy fans that don't like techno thrillers don't like my Mira Grant stuff, and techno thriller and zombie fans that don't like urban fantasy don't like my Seanan stuff, and that's okay. I feel like they are more forgiving because the title on the cover tells them what they're getting.
Yep.
As a marketing tool, a pseudonym, especially an open pseudonym, so that you can continue to market and continue to promote it, can set the mood for what's within the covers in a way that will improve your reviews.
That it's funny. We've used the phrase curating an audience in the past about like sort of weeding out the people who won't like you, so that you end up with a higher overall opinion of you. And you basically, you get to divert your audience into the two camps that might actually like it. It gives you two chances to get somebody, I suppose.
Yeah.
One last question before I hand you off to Jeff. You've got some top-notch covers. In fact, one of them, Feed, you had released that book, and it was making the rounds around the same time that I was releasing my first book, so it was everywhere when I was first starting to keep track of like rankings and stuff. I think I know the answer to this based upon the other questions, but how much influence do you have over your cover design?
I actually have more influence over my cover design for the most part than I contractually have to have. And
Nice.
Part of that is that I recognize that I am not a cover designer. You know, I do have a vague artistic eye. I can say I don't like this and here is why, and I will generally be listened to, but I don't try to make the cover. And I don't get so wedded to the idea of the cover that is in my head that I won't listen to the art director whose job it is to do this and make it awesome. Lucky with the Seanan McGuire covers for the Toby Day series. I have Chris McGrath, who does fantastic urban fantasy covers, and the Toby books are really coded male. If you look at how Toby is posed on the covers, how she's dressed, how she's presented like she were Harry Dresden. You know, she's not presented like she was Anita Blake. Nothing is wrong with Anita Blake, just that I don't write sexy urban fantasy. I write very noir detective urban fantasy, and I think that helped me too. A good cover can save you. I've only had one cover I really didn't like. Everything else has been fantastic. I actually got to petition for the cover for my encrypted books, Ali Fell, and that was fantastic because he's been wonderful to work with. So I've been really lucky. I get listened to more than I technically should, and I'm going to knock on wood now that doesn't stop. Luckily, I have a nice wooden desk here.
Excellent. It's funny you say how the cover design helped you out. People say you shouldn't judge a book by its cover, and we've come to the conclusion a book's cover should represent its contents, and therefore you should be able to judge a book by its cover.
Right. And unfortunately, a book that looks cheap is going to be viewed as cheap, whether it's the best book in the world or not. I got asked to read a book by a friend of a friend who was going to self-publish, and she sent me a printed out copy of the book, including the cover, and the cover was appalling. If I had not already promised my friend, yes, I will read this, I just would have binned it. It looked like every bad stereotype about self-published science fiction. It looked unreadable. And it was amazing. It was one of the best books I read that year. I'm not going to name it because I just hashed on the cover real hard, and that's not nice. But it's even primed completely to give this book a look. I almost threw it away because the cover was so bad. And I think part of that is that a lot of us do secretly think that we're cover designers. I know my characters. I know what it should look. You don't know it nearly as well as the people who art for a living. Let the people who art for a living do your design. Unless you are Chuck Tingle and then just Photoshop a butt onto something and you'll be fine.
If you're Chuck Tingle, you'll be fine no matter what.
Well, that's true, because butts can go anywhere.
Darn right. All right, I got to hand you off to Jeff for the next couple of questions.
All right. I've been waiting to see if anyone was going to ask about this, but wandering the swamps, exactly what does that mean? Literally?
I went to the University of California, Berkeley, go Bears, as a dual major in folklore and herpetology, which is basically the fairy tales and dragons degree. I love frogs. I would let my sister drown in a bog if it meant I got a frog. I will do virtually anything for frogs, snakes, or lizards. And they are frequently, surprise, found in swamps. So I spent a lot of time in swamps. I'm very good with small children in swamps because small children have no fear at all. So I'll be like, do you see that pit? I bet there's a rattlesnake in that pit. Let's get in the pit, guys. And they'll go, yay. And then we come back covered in mud with a bucket of rattlesnakes. Thus far, I have not lost any.
You're talking about kids, not rattlesnakes, right?
Sure.
Does you have the swamp theme in any of your books at all, out of curiosity?
Not yet. Well, no, actually, in Encrypted, I have a herpetologist character in part so that I could wax rhapsodic about the beauties of the swamp. And a few people told me that was unrealistic. No one would love swamps that much. And my girlfriend laughed at them.
Okay, so now on a more serious note, I was looking at some of the pricing there. I realize most of the times, especially traditionally published authors, don't have any say about their pricing there. But I noticed a lot of some of the stuff that you had was it for $1.99 on Amazon. I mean, do you have any say about any feedback on what you'd like to put your books at, or is that completely out of your hands?
It is completely out of my hands, and for the most part, in the hands of people who actually studied economics, which I find very important for me, because I am traditionally published. So I get a smaller percentage of the cover price than someone who is self-publishing. So I have to trust that the accounting department knows what they're doing. And on the whole, they do. They usually will drop the first book in a series to $1.99 or $2.99 for a sale, and we will see a spike in other books in the series. So it's kind of you lose some money on one end to make more on the other. Honestly, and I know some people will probably throw tomatoes at me in effigy, but honestly, I'd like to see more people increase the price of their books $1 or $2, just because you're worth more than you're probably selling yourself for. A sales price is great, but Amazon encouraged us and other places encouraged us to think that a book should cost $2 brand new. My quickest written book took me 6 weeks. If you only paid $2 for it, even if I got all of it, I'd have to sell more copies to make minimum wage than any given book is likely to sell.
As a traditionally published author, do you have access to all your sales reports, whatnot? I mean, if you wanted to find out how you're doing that particular day, week, or month, do you have that information at your fingertips, or do you have to call someone and find that out?
Well, as a traditionally published author, no one has that information on the daily basis because the book is being sold through a million different channels. I am a traditionally published author, traditionally published by Amazon, because I'm a 47 North author. And with them, I can get my ebook publishing my ebook stats daily and my books through them stats daily. But the books that they send out to Baker and Taylor that then go out to bookstores, they don't have a daily report of when those sell. I believe Barnes and Noble reports weekly. Borderlands reports weekly. Any New York Times reporting store will report their sales on a weekly basis. But if your store is not New York Times reporting, you might report monthly. So there is literally no one that has that information if they are selling books outside of a single site. Now, I can get the weekly numbers if I want them. There are various services. Penguin has an author portal. Orbit has an author portal. I'm part of a couple groups that have group book scan accounts. So I can get the weekly or I can get the monthly. I generally don't be a little twitchy. Also remember that with traditional publishing, because there are more physical books involved than with most self-publishing. I'm going to make some blanket statements. I know that we still have the 5,000 books in a garage, whether they're selling well or not. But traditional publishing, for the most part, is more physical than self-publishing. So I think currently I have 60% physical to 40% electronic. My friend Jennifer Brozek, who is mostly self-published, but has had some success with small press traditional publishing and writes great stuff. She's about 60% electronic, 40% physical. And I think she's high on the physical end for a self-published author. For me, bookstores have to keep what's called a reserve against returns in case copies of the book have been damaged in such a way that they are not saleable. Or in case we had just an incident today with a bookstore that I had done an event at, sent me an email and said, hey, can you please sign and personalize a book and send it to us? We'll send you a replacement copy of that book and also postage, because there was a printer error in a copy of the book that had been signed and personalized at the event where 20 pages were printed so lightly they were illegible. And so they're going to get a book from me, send me a fresh book, and send that errored book back to the publisher. It doesn't count as 2 sales, even though 2 books have been removed from the wild.
Makes sense. Okay, is there anything you're surprised your traditional publisher doesn't do for you that you wish they would?
I wish that they would send me a kitten. I really want a new kitten, and I just feel that I should be able to contact the Maine Coon breeders and be like, I'm a New York Times bestselling author. Can you put me to the top of your waiting list? And that should work. I think that should work. But no, I acknowledge that I have been very fortunate. I am with DAW as myself, DAW Books, which is simultaneously a very small publishing house and a very large New York publisher. They manage that paradox by being privately owned but distributed by Penguin Random House. And that means that when I say, 15-book urban fantasy series, they go, okay, that sounds like a party, rather than, well, if you don't hit the New York Times list every single time, we're going to drop you. And Mira Grant, I'm with Orbit, which is a much bigger, much younger, much hungrier publisher. And they are, and this is no slight to Orbit. If you are someone with Orbit watching this podcast, I still love you. But they are less long-term loyal because that's not their business model. They don't do 15-book series. They do trilogies. They do duologies. They do fast in and out. And that means they have a lot of marketing. They put a lot of push behind me. I've been very happy with my publishers. I don't think there's anything that I really wanted them to do that they haven't done for me.
Okay.
Except for the kitten thing.
Okay. Do you have a specific, in case they're listening, do you have a specific breed of cat in mind?
Oh, I have 2 Maine Coons. I'd like another one.
Maine Coons, those are pretty cats.
Oh yeah, they're the smaller of my 2 cats weighs 24 pounds. They're both the size of corgis.
And I have a corgi, so I know exactly the size of that. So, alrighty, let me hand you back over to Lindsay. We can get some marketing and Patreon questions going for you.
All right. That's a big cat. Now I'm thinking about cats instead of publishing.
Aw.
My dogs would be excited to chase a 25-pound cat. All right. I'm curious, you just had a new release, it looks like, in your October Days series. What does a book launch look for you? What does a book launch look like for you these days?
Well, this particular book launch was slightly idiosyncratic. I just moved from California to the Pacific Northwest. So it turns out that moving 1,000 miles in 2 states is really difficult. Like, it's hard. And I've been a little cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. So I was not as wholeheartedly behind the launch as I would normally like to be. I almost always have a large event at one or more local bookstores. We only did one for Once Broken Faith, and that was at San Francisco's Borderlands Books. And those will usually have a live band in. I get cupcakes. We do raffle prizes. I mean, the thing about a launch party is there's no single model. There's no right way to do it. Good, it worked. Come here, Alice. Alice, hang on. I've got something better than a launch party.
We're going to see the 24-pound cat, is what I'm guessing.
No, you're going to see the 28-pound cat.
The 28-pound cat, that's actually a medium-sized dog, I believe. All right, those of you who are listening only on audio, I'm sorry. You'll just have to take our word for it. There's a very large cat looking at us right now. Well, actually, she's kind of avoiding eye contact. We're not worthy.
This is Alice.
Hi, Alice.
She weighs 28 pounds.
That's a big, fluffy cat.
She is immense. But yeah, so we have a live band. We get cupcakes in. We do raffles. You can do really whatever you want, whatever feels right for you. For example, I try to avoid reading whenever possible, unless it's the first book in a series, because if you are reading something from the latest book, you're alienating people who are just now trying to come in and start reading you. And if you're reading something from the first book, you're boring people who've been with you from the beginning. So it's much more fun to do a Q&A, do a world building discussion. I really love bringing in debut authors. My friend Michelle Baker. Hi, baby, you want to go? Okay, you go. My friend Michelle Baker's first book came out this past March. And so we did a combo party, a release with the two of us. And that way she could get some of my readers to come and hear her when she might not have had as large of an audience. And I could have someone to take a little bit of the pressure off when I was wanting to take a break or have a drink of water. Our very first Borderlands event, I showed up with a schedule that I'd broken down into 15-minute increments throughout the night, which I still do. And afterward, the general manager of the bookstore was looking a little stunned. I asked if she was okay, and she says, you told me exactly what you were going to do tonight. I didn't believe you. I won't do that again. So that was fun.
Do you warn them ahead of time before you show up with the band, or is that just a...
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, no, we never, ever, ever piss off the bookstores. The bookstores control everything. You know, a single Barnes & Noble can't control how much the chain orders, but they can control whether they have you back, whether they have other science fiction authors back or other romance authors, whatever. And if enough Barnes & Nobles report to corporate that you've been awful to their event staff, well, then that does affect your order. If it's an independent bookstore, it doesn't matter whether you're brand new or Patrick Rothfuss or Stephen King. They can decide not to stock your books if you're awful enough to them, or to just say, we don't want you back. These are the people who hand sell you, who get you out to the world, and they are absolutely people who deserve your respect, your kindness, and your warning about things.
All right. I've never been to a book signing yet where there was a band, so I feel like I need to come see you the next time I'm in Seattle at the Barnes & Noble. Do you have to pay for any of the costs yourself, or do your publishers cover it when you do the
I pay for pretty much everything myself, except on very rare occasions. But it is, for the most part, tax deductible because it's a business expense. And there is a certain joy to making my accountant deal with the tax deductible cupcakes.
I'm sure you get to sample a few yourself, right? Because, you know, you got to keep going for the night.
Usually. There was one event where everything went perfectly except they forgot to hold back a cupcake for me. And I was very, very sad. Only everything else went perfectly, so I was willing to take it.
Cranky author, no cupcake. All right. So it sounds like with the way you're releasing books so quickly, I know that really helps. It's kind of its own marketing, I guess, if you always have something new coming out. Do you find that's the case in traditional publishing, that a lot of your marketing is helped along just by keeping your name out there and keeping new books coming out?
I think so. I haven't done it any other way, so I don't really know. I have friends that don't publish as much. Catherine Valenti is a good friend of mine, and she seems to do just fine without a book coming out every 3 months. So I think it's partially how much energy do you have, and how much sincerity the books continue to contain. I think if it ever started reading like I was just doing this to pay the mortgage, people would probably not show up for the next one.
Okay. And do you feel that if somebody got into traditional publishing today and they wanted to have that same kind of career path, they like to write a lot, they like to publish a lot, is there anything special? Do you have to warn them and say like, hey, I'm going to have this many books? Or did you come with more than one to start with? Or is this pretty normal? You mentioned Cozy Mysteries, them handling multiple releases.
First off, if you're going to go into if you are going to go into traditional publishing and you want to do what I do, in that you want to be multiple people and you want to publish a ludicrous number of books, tell your agent, do not try to do this unagented. You can be successful in traditional publishing unagented, but that's kind of assuming that one book every 2 years and possibly a mild background in legal matters so that you understand the contracts that you're being offered. But you need to be able to tell your agent, I want to write in 6 different genres that are not related to one another. I want to publish 3 books a year, 4 books a year. I write this fast and I can't slow down. And the problem with trunk novels is that they become dated very quickly. People like to ask if I have anything I've never sold. I actually do have a book I've never sold and don't think I ever can, because it requires nostalgia for an era of the internet that no one is nostalgic for, which is post-Eternal September, but pre-heavy graphical internet. It's so you have to know your own speed, know where you are comfortable kind of cruising to avoid burnout, and communicate that clearly to the only other person whose job it is to care about your career as much as you do. My publishers don't have to care about where I am. 18% off of me does. And if that is your goal, you want to go for that kind of traditional publishing. I know that an agent is extraneous to a lot of self-publishing activities. And an agent can be a luxury if you're doing very minor traditionally publishing activities. You want to go whole hog, I'm just going to try and release 30 books through my traditional publishing channels in 7 years. Get a good agent and communicate all this clearly. You don't ever want to walk into your publisher either and say, hey, I've got this 15-book series. Yeah. You want to walk in and say, I've got this trilogy I'd like you to take a look at. And the first one is here, and the second one is completely outlined for you to have for your consideration. And get that contract for 3. And then after you've published the second one, say, hey, I was thinking there might be a book 4 and 5. Do my sales for 1 and 2 support book 4 and 5? That'll allow you to increase your contract values each time. You're not asking for one 15-book contract that the average advance for a science fiction or fantasy author is $5,000 a book for your first book. So if you were coming in with a 15-book contract at $5,000 each, that's a $75,000 contract. That's not small potatoes, but that's 15 books at $5,000 a book. You're worth more than that if you can write 15 books in a row. But it might be worth it to take $5,000 a book for 1 through 3, so that then you can say, hey, look how good my sales were. How about you give me $10,000 for 4 and 5? Hey, could I maybe get 15 for 6 and 7? And you won't always be able to increase at that level, but you'll be able to kind of keep your salary expanding.
All right, great. Excellent advice. I know very little about that world, so it's really great to hear about it. Okay, now the thing that first drew my attention to you, I mean, I have friends that have read your books and great things about them, but somebody mentioned your Patreon page, so I went and checked it out, because I always want these things to work really well for people and be options for them. And I don't think we mentioned it on the show yet, but you've got almost 8,000 pledged per short story that you write, I believe. Could you tell us what led you to Patreon and how things are going so far?
Well, did you read the text on my Patreon page?
I did, about toasters.
Okay. Toasters, yes. So as I mentioned, I just relocated from California to the Pacific Northwest. I was essentially leaving a common law marriage. I had lived with this gentleman since I was 19 years old, and he no longer wished to live with me, which, yay, you can be perfectly good for someone when you meet them and turn around 10 years later and you're terrible for each other. So the goal with the Patreon was not to shame my former housemate. But entire adult life living with someone, you'll turn around and find that you never bought a lot of the things that normal adults own, like bookshelves or couches or a toaster. So I set up a page. I had resisted getting a Patreon because I am not one of the top probably 20% of paid traditionally published authors. I'm not a millionaire. I'm not going to run off to Bora Bora for a year. But I make a living. I can pay my bills. I can pay my taxes. I take care of my mother, and I do that on my writing and on my contracts. And I also know that generic value of you, have a limited amount of money to throw around for things like Patreon and supporting your favorite artists. So I had resisted getting on Patreon because at the end of the day, I didn't feel like I needed your dollar more than the person next to me did. I know that there are authors who need their Patreons to pay their power bill or to pay the printing costs. And for them, Patreon is a life or death matter. And it wasn't for me until I started facing moving costs. And moving costs are horrifying. It's so expensive. I was living in the San Francisco Bay Area and I could not afford to stay, even though that is where I am from. Even the proceeds from sale of the house wouldn't keep me there for more than a year. It is no longer safe to be a renter in that market because all of the landlords recognize that they can increase your rent 1,000-fold as soon as someone with a techie job shows up in your neighborhood. People I know that have lived in their homes for 15, 20 years are getting evicted on basis of nothing. So I had to go somewhere else, and that it wasn't going to happen without something like the Patreon. I think part of the positive response, I mean, you mentioned that I'm getting quite a lot per story pledged right now. And part of that is that I said I will post no more than one paid thing per month, and this will end after a year. And so it feels more like a project and less like an ongoing obligation. And I think that has made a difference, which is not saying anything bad about people who need Patreon as an ongoing obligation. If you need to be able to say, my art requires me to have this Patreon pretty much forever, that's great. Be upfront about it. But I do think a lot of why, as a traditionally published author, I have gotten a good response when a lot of traditionally published authors don't necessarily get a good response because people assume that our publishers are paying our bills. Is because I was very upfront about this is to buy me a new toaster.
Yeah, it seems like it's nice too when it's not just a flat monthly fee, whether you produce anything or not. People see that they're going to get a story, and you had some bonuses and things. And I actually think it's great for traditional published authors because it sounds like you're doing really well, but I know a lot of them are maybe selling the same amount as indie authors, but because they don't keep nearly as much of the sales price, they may be struggling even though they look really successful. So I love the idea of Kickstarter or Patreon to, make it work so you can be a full-time author. I love that.
Yeah.
When you decided to go ahead and launch it, did you have what did you email your mailing list, or how do you think you got so much interest?
I don't have a mailing list or a Facebook page, really. I have one. My PA runs it. I don't go anywhere near it. I made a blog post and I told Twitter. So that has pretty much been with minimal marketing. And I'm so grateful. People have really helped a lot and enabled me to buy an enormous amount of IKEA. So much IKEA.
You should get an awesome toaster. Get the ones that cook rotisserie chickens and stuff.
I don't want to put a rotisserie chicken in my toaster, but I have a toaster and now my mother has a toaster. So we're a toast heavy family.
It was great to see how much you can do on that with once you do have a name established and you do have a loyal following. Do you do anything else to keep in touch with your fans and kind of let them know what's going on? Since it sounds like you're not doing a mailing list, but you must have a website. Nothing. Twitter.
I do have a website. I have a website. It's at www.seananmcguire.com. and I still have my live journal, which I update pretty steadily. Mostly I'm on Twitter. It is occasionally frustrating because I will say, you know, this is in X location, and people don't like to go to a different website, but you actually can't put everything on the same website. It gets cluttered and unreadable. So I don't know that there's a perfect solution yet, but I try to be as active as I can.
Awesome. Probably they remember the band and the cupcakes, and then they got to come check out.
Yeah, the cupcakes are definitely memorable.
I would remember authors more who gave me cupcakes. It's just the truth. All right.
Sugar is a great encoder.
Yep. Congratulations on the toasters. I'll hand it to the guys for a few more questions.
Okay.
I'm going to be talking a bit about Patreon, but first I just want to say, as I was growing up, I had a Maine Coon cat named Oliver, so I'm quite familiar with them. All right, so Patreon. What kind of perks do you offer your patrons?
Every month we get a positivity email with notes on writing, things that I'm recommending, television, movies, things they might enjoy. I send out postcards quarterly. We're doing a quarterly chapbook, which is going to be a printout of one of the stories from the Patreon. I'm getting ready to print and format the first one. At the higher levels, there are options to have me send you all of my traditionally published books as they come out. The thing about Patreon rewards, and I consulted with a bunch of people, is that this is a Patreon to help me deal with the costs of moving. And moving is super stressful. So if I said, pledge at X level and I guarantee you an hour-long Skype chat, I'd never get anything done. You know, so you have to balance out what you can offer to make things a little bit more special and a little bit more exciting with what can I actually do. And so most of my rewards are non-tangible. There's a toaster video. Every month I make a video to show people that month's toaster, which I have to do this month's toaster because we just finished putting up the new set of IKEA bookshelves and covering them in books. Oh my God, I own so many books. It's horrifying how many books I have. We're supposed to do a world building video where I will answer questions about the previous month's story, but thus far no one's actually asked any world building questions. So our video each month has been me going, ask questions. God.
It's amazing how difficult it is to get people to ask questions sometimes.
It is. And it's interesting question, a spoiler question. Like, world question. How long has the Hogwarts Express been running? Spoiler question. Is Ron ever going to get with Cho Chang? Like, what? No.
Yeah, I do question and answer videos, and there's a yellow hat in the background there behind me. That is the spoiler hat. I will put that on when answering a spoiler question so that people have a visual cue when they shouldn't be listening.
Nice.
All right, so we're getting near the hour, so I'll try to be quick with the next two. Okay, you mentioned earlier that like when you're giving out these things on Patreon, or you give out free stuff, people have an unusual entitlement to what they're giving you. And I've heard from a lot of artists that when people patronize you, support you at a certain level, the higher the level, the greater the degree of entitlement they seem to have. Have you observed that, or do you have a pretty mannerly bunch?
I have a pretty mannerly bunch. I mean, most of the entitlement has not been on Patreon, because on Patreon, what I always encountered was you value what you pay for. Which is why, for example, the SPCA recommends adoption fees for cats, even if you're rehoming them via Craigslist, rather than just, here, take my cat, unless it's a close personal friend. Because someone that gives you $50 to rehome your cat, they're more likely to be nice to the cat.
Yeah.
Rather than doing something terrible to it. So my patrons on Patreon, they feel that they've paid. They're getting something that is meant to be, that they've placed a value on it. That value is their donation. Where I've encountered the entitlement is with my free website fiction, where it's just anyone can come and download it, anyone can come and have it. And that, I think, I'm kind of getting, you get what you pay for too. They're getting it for free, and so they're valuing it as a free thing. But the gratitude is more than the entitlement. More people are happy and thankful than are nasty to me, so I keep doing it.
Yeah, that it's amazing, and it seems so backwards that when you like that the free thing is where you feel like you should be calling the shots, whereas if you're actually paying for it, you just are happy to get what you get. It really ought to be the other way around.
You'd think.
All right, so one last question. I don't know how tightly you pay attention to it, but you say that you only put out one paid fiction a month on Patreon. Do you see a lot of fluctuation around releases, or do you not even really pay attention to that? Like, do people show up to get the release and then sort of vanish again?
Well, given that you'd have to pay, there's adjustments throughout the month. People up their pledges, people down their pledges. Occasionally folks will contact me and say, hey, I'm pledging at level X because I want to help, but I'm going to have to stop after a month or two. But there hasn't really been that much up and down around the release itself. Now, there is a lot of up when I say that the story that's coming is something people want, just in terms of new people signing. So, for example, I have a series called Encrypted. It's about a family of cryptozoologists that has living with them a species of pantheistic mice. They are mice that have religion. They got religion in a big way. It is part of their neural programming, and they worship the core family as gods. They're the Aislinn mice. Everyone loves them. Everyone's been asking me for something from their perspective since the series started. I have been telling people since the series started, you don't actually want that. They're like chocolate covered bacon. A little bit is really nice, but 6 pounds of it, you're gonna get sick. But people were very firm. So one of the stretch goals on my Patreon was that I would write an Aislinn mouse novella, and that's scheduled for April. And I will put up a reminder around March 25th that on April 1st, the Aislinn mouse novella will drop. And I'm sure we'll have a big spike in $1 patrons who just want to get that novella. And that's fine, because everything helps.
Yep. Yeah, I have a little bit of the same thing going right now. I had asked the fans for questions, what short stories did they want in my sci-fi setting, and everyone wanted a short story from the point of view of the obligatory cute character whose name is Squee. And they're going to get it, and let's see if they like what they get.
Yeah. I've done Aislinn perspective stories before, and people have never been as happy as they thought they'd be. Like, yeah. What did they do to that kitten? They're talking intelligent mice. What do you think they did to the kitten? They ate the kitten. That's what they did.
All right. So I'm going to hand you off to Jeff for the last few questions.
Okay.
Alrighty. Well, so you already touched on one of my first questions, which social platforms you use. I heard you say Facebook, and you don't necessarily run it, so that takes care of that particular question. Knowing how long it can take for an author to receive any type of word from when they're submitting to agents and publishers, would you recommend new authors try the traditional route, or should they try self-pubbing?
I think that you should absolutely try the traditional route, period. Whether you want it or not, you should try it, and you should be continuing to write and improve while you wait to hear back. Frankly, if you're not patient enough to wait for that first rejection, you're probably not going to be happy with the sort of interaction you're going to have with people, regardless of whether you're traditionally published or self-published. It takes time to become an overnight success. It takes time to break out. It takes time to build an audience, and that's not going to happen with the snap of your fingers. More importantly, most of us, again to generalize, but most of us, whether traditional or independent, are functionally working in a vacuum up until we start getting books out. We may have a readers group, we may not. That readers group may be good, it may not. My first readers group was terrible and toxic, and I didn't know that until I got to one that wasn't full of people that wanted to tear other authors down to make themselves get more important. So it is very easy to finish a book at 60% of what it could be and say, this is good enough, and either send it off to a literary agent or press publish. Now, if you send it to a literary agent, you're going to get it back with a note that says this is 60% of what it could be. I don't want it because it's only 60%. Well, great. You can take another run at it. You can get it to 80%. You can get it to 100%. You can get it to, yes, please let me publish this. Where have you been all my life? And then you can say, you know what? Screw you. I want to self-publish. You took a year to get back to me. This isn't what I want. I've done more research while I waited, but thanks for reassuring me without being my mother that this is really, really good. Again, that book with the terrible cover that I read for a friend of a friend. I read that book and said, oh my God, this is the next Hunger Games. You take this, you break the story here and here, you expand it into a 3-book trilogy rather than being one kind of overstuffed novel, and you're talking a 6-figure bidding war. This is a phenomenal moneymaker if you want to put the time in. And the author said, yeah, that sounds like a lot of work and self-published, and last time I checked, they had sold 14 copies. You know, it's traditional publishing is not a guarantee, but neither is self-publishing. And there are self-published authors who take their craft every bit as seriously as traditionally published authors, if not more so. I know self-published authors that frankly deserve to be part of the litany of classics of this decade and of the next decade. But it's so easy to give up when it gets hard. And those gatekeepers, the agents and the publishers, they are gatekeepers. They are filtering for quality, but you get to choose whether you step through. You should absolutely try to traditionally publish, even if you decide you don't want it. Also, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was like, go ahead.
Also, quite frankly, you know, Hugh Howey, Andy Weir, John Cho, you know, John Wong, David Wong. God, what is wrong with me? David Wong. They're outliers. But by going traditionally published while continuing to self-publish, they increased the audience for their self-published works. I have a successful series of superhero shorts that I run on my live journal. I literally post these on the oldest, worst blogging platform still extant on the internet, that have now been collected into 3 print volumes. That would never have happened if I wasn't traditionally published, which got me the name recognition that sent publishers looking for things they could collect.
Very good point. Yeah, so we've talked to quite a few that actually like traditionally published authors, and they'll turn around, they'll try something self-published, and because of their name recognition for the traditional, they get quite a lot of business going into the self. So yeah,
exactly. Well. Hybrid publishing, I think, is very good for you.
Is there anything you wish you would have known before you signed with your publisher? If given the chance, what would you tell a younger version of yourself before you signed that contract?
So if I'm going back in time to before I signed that contract, I'd have told the younger version of myself to get a new doctor before I nearly lost the ability to walk. But apart from that, I know, but it's true. Like, once I have a time machine, screw talking to my publisher. I want to fix the plantar fasciitis. But, you know, strictly in publishing, really, I've been very, very fortunate, and I recognize that. I've had a couple of editorial notes I wish I hadn't taken, but I haven't signed any really predatory contracts. I haven't had any publishers really out to take advantage of me. And the fact that I can say that doesn't mean anyone else should count on that. I am an outlier. I should not necessarily be counted. And I think that that is important too. A lot of us will talk to one person or talk to 2 people and go, this is the one real experience. This is how it works. Well, there is no how it works. DAW, which is my small publisher, they're very small. It can take up to 2 years to hear back. I sold a book to them in 14 days.
Impressive.
It's because my agent knew who to call, and I had a recommendation from another DAW author, and 87 different factors. But you can't factor that. You can't take that 14 days and that 2 years and average them out. It doesn't work. So you need to talk to more than just one person. You need to understand that a lot of things are idiosyncratic and possibly irreplicable.
Good to know. Yeah, you are the first person that I've asked that question to that said, and I quote, "To hell with the publishers. I'm going to go back and change something else instead." So, made me laugh. Good answer.
Yeah, I like my publishers. I'd also have my Siamese tested for kidney disease earlier.
Well,
like, can I just borrow your time machine? That would be super cool of you. I promise not to use it to bring the English sweating sickness into the present. Much.
On that pleasant note, let me hand you back over to Lindsay, and we'll go ahead and wrap this up for you.
Great, thanks.
All right, yeah, why don't you just finish up by telling people where they can find you, and maybe like you've got a new release out in your series. Would you like, go ahead and plug anything you'd like to plug, I guess I should say.
Okay, you can find me at www.seananmcguire.com, or I'm on Twitter as @SeananMcGuire. If you're afraid of snakes, don't follow me on Twitter. It will make you very sad. I did just have a book out, Once Broken Faith, but as it is book 10 in my ongoing series, I do not recommend reading it unless you have read through 9. I do recommend reading book 1, which is called Rosemary and Rue. And by buying my books, you can feed my massive, massive cats who enjoy eating and will one day eat me if enough people don't feed them. Ellen Perkins, this has been Mutual of Omaha's Wild Kingdom. And this fall, I will be visiting Iowa, Illinois, Ohio, Alabama, and Tennessee. If you check my website, you can see where possible appearances will be. You can always order signed and personalized books from Borderlands Books in San Francisco and help feed their cats. I'm very fond of their cats, so that's a good thing to do also.
Awesome. And I'll point out right now for anyone that's listening in the next few days or this month that your first book is only $1.99, at least on Amazon. I just took a peek. So I don't know how long the publisher will keep it at that price, but seems like a good deal.
It's a great intro price.
All right, cool. Well, thanks so much for coming on the show and answering our questions. And thanks for listening, everyone. This is episode 99. So you can get the links that she mentioned at marketingsff.com, episode 99.
It's nice to meet you. Thanks for all the info.
Nice meeting you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.